Half hour. This is your half hour call. Half hour call. Hello, 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 and welcome to Half Hour Call, the podcast where we talk about live theater, TV, film, basically everything entertainment. I'm your host, Rich Kless. Today, we're going to be finishing up our interview with Erin Sullivan. So, without further ado, let's get back to that interview right now. Enjoy. Jobs.
Yeah,
so,
I mean that would have shook me pretty hard. That's intense.
so let me ask you this. I know when I was touring out of New York, there were, between gigs, I had a home base. My home base was Whisper Music Fair on Long Island. Whenever I wasn't on a show, went back there and I was able to work and that kind of thing. Did you have a home base, or did you kind of were able to book stuff kind of continuously?
I That's one of the hardest things. So in my book that you had kind of mentioned in the
Hmm.
intro, I have a chapter on, how do you get the next job while you're out on a job?
Hmm.
Because when you're on a tour, you're so happy to be there, but a lot of times the tours not necessarily it's kind of a weird three-way split. Either the tour might not renew, like the tour might just end, and then
Right.
you're like, okay, well, yeah, or the tour might not want to re-sign your contract, or you might not want to continue with the tour. So it's always kind of tricky trying to find the next job when you're not there to audition for the next job. Video auditions were kind of coming into play while I was on those, so we were actually able to do some video submissions, and while we were on tour, we were actually all helping each other out with other bookings.
Right.
I remember one of my good friends, she was my roommate my second year hairspray, and we were constantly making her other audition videos. She actually booked the Spam a Lot tour while we were on hairspray because of video submissions. But I mean, I had a couple regional theaters that if it worked out with the timing, they'd always, and there was a role appropriate for me, I would submit some stuff and they'd bring me in. Um, or I would come home like to Wilmington. I mean, that was definitely, I ended up coming home to do Legally Blonde right after Shrek, which was right before I went to go to West Virginia Public Theater and do a couple shows. So you kind of just have to, I mean, it's definitely performers and auditioners nowadays have it way easier than we did back
Absolutely.
where I had like audition videos on a VHS that I would put into like a bubble mailer and send to people. Where now you're like, oh, can I just send you a link? I'm like,
Right.
because I was doing the hustle
Right.
hardcore.
They didn't work. They didn't work for it like we got to work for it.
Oh man, I know, but it made it just so sweet. So when
Right.
you booked it, you're like, ah,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
I know. I look at my VHS and I'm like, how on earth did anybody ever watch this and be like, this girl's talented? Like,
Right.
I don't know how I got lucky. So yeah, it was just always kind of so home base wise, it just kind of when it worked out when it did. And that's why sometimes having such, great working relationships with, professional regional gigs, they can be that downtime. And sometimes though you want to have a little bit of a break and a vocal break and just go, and have that part-time job that, like Joe Allen was that for me when I would, that's when I was like, I took myself off the road though.
Hmm.
And then but I would still like leave Joe Allen for 6 to 8 weeks to go do a regional gig to come on back. But
Right.
yeah, I think it's like it's good to always find where you want to have that downtime in between gigs, whether it is at a theater that or if you go back into like just a day job that
Right.
you kind of regroup you as a person being in one place and not living your life on a bus in a hotel.
Right. Right. So let's talk a little bit more about your book I have right here. Um,
It's
what
my book
made
is
you?
so dated now. It's so dated.
It's not really. It's definitely helpful to, I think, like to people. I think there's a lot of still relevant information that you're giving in there. But let's ask what sparked you to write it. Like, why did you go? I had to write this stuff down because nobody's gonna believe this, or is it just
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. So when I booked Hairspray, I actually reached out to some people, and this is like I feel like non-union touring was kind of getting really thick in that like 2005, 2006 era,
Mhm.
from what I remember. And I had just when I booked it, I had no idea what to expect, and I was like, okay, because I'd been on a tour, but not a bus and truck.
Mhm.
Like I was on that bougie tour. I wasn't on like a sleeper bus. I wasn't bouncing from city to city, one nighters. Like I was not. And I reached out and I was like, there was no information on the internet about it. I mean, these platforms didn't exist like they did today. You know, this is back in 2000, 6, 7. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to learn by doing. And I had a couple people who were like, oh yeah, advice wise, blah, blah, blah. But once I booked my first couple of tours and the second wave of audition generation started coming in, who were like right out of college, and this is like when Facebook was like becoming a big thing, I was just getting so many requests from people asking for advice.
Right.
I mean, like, hey, we've seen, you've done these tours before. Do you have any advice? Do you have any advice? And I was very much getting into producing after I got off the road. And I was very fortunate to be mentored by this really great, amazing, creative group of producers in New York City, who I still am very good friends with to this day. And one of the producers who had kind of taken me under their wing when I just was like, oh my gosh, I've just been getting all these messages. And he was like, well, why don't you write a book? I joked. I said, I should just write a book. And he's like, well, why don't you? And I was like, what did, like, okay, that's like, okay. And I was like, wait, really? He was like, yeah, I will fully support you and guide you in that. Cause he also too was a financial advisor and he was self-published as well. So I was like, are you serious? He's like, yeah, he goes, I will completely, I will guide you in this experience. If go ahead and do it. And so I was like, okay.
Okay.
And so I just kind of very Carrie Bradshaw, Sex in the City style, sat down and just started writing about stuff I wish I knew and gathered from people who had asked me questions for stuff they wanted to know. And then I added the next layer in asking other people who I toured with or done other tours for advice. So as you can see in the back, I've got an entire, additional contributors to the book as well, because I wanted it to be not just my experience, but other people's experiences too, with their pointers and their tips and their tools. And it just kind of, I wrote a how-to book. And, it was really rewarding because, I did actually, Mark Bruni came to my
Mm-hmm.
launch party. I had a lot of support. I was so excited to be inducted into the drama bookshop, which for me as a childhood, it was a childhood dream come true. Because I'd been going to that bookstore my entire life.
Well, you're an actor in New York. You kind of live there. I mean, I
Yeah,
get
you go
that.
there. It's just it's church. It's a church space. And then I kind of just it's a very niche publication, but I think what was most like amazing is that I helped a lot of parents. I would have, I did all my own sales out of Amazon, which was like, all right, I got a couple sales, and I would package things up and walk down to the post office in Astoria. And so it was when I get letters from parents being like, thank you so much because our, 20-year-old just booked a tour, is going to take a hiatus from college. We couldn't even tell we're not in the industry. And so it was really fun to like reach out to people. And it's funny because even, I worked at the Wilson Center here in Wilmington, which is a touring home. And a lot of times I got recognized from some of these kids coming through. They're like, oh my gosh, I have your book. And I was like, what? And, one of my best friends, he has a roommate and it was somebody who was subletting out of his apartment. And he was in his room one day chatting with them. And he's like, oh my God, he's like, you have Erin's book. He's like, your book's right there. And like, it just would pop up everywhere. And I just was like, that's so random. But, and again, like it's a niche publication, but and now it is a little dated because I published it in like 2015.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Is it 15? Yeah. But still, you're right. A lot of it is still relevant.
Well,
It
I
is
mean,
out of publication. I didn't go back and republish. I sold about 2,000 copies. But
yeah, I mean, if nothing else, like somebody like me, I actually read it going, yeah, I remember that. Oh, yeah,
yeah,
totally did.
the good
So,
old shower caddy on the bus window. Oh yeah.
but there was a lot of stuff that was, very relatable in terms of, don't, like things to pack. That whole section was like, yeah, yeah. Oh my
And
God,
still
don't
to
do
this,
that.
I wrote a book about packing, and I still don't know how to pack.
No,
Like
well, it's
it's terrible. I'm about to go to London in like in 10 days, and I'm like, I don't know how to pack. I'm like, Erin, you're pathetic. You like can advise people, but you can't take your own advice.
right.
Like,
All right, well, let's talk about that because since you mentioned going to London, that's kind of one of the next things you've been working on since you've been off tour is with Love Maryland. Can we talk about that a little bit? How did that develop? I mean, I know I've
oh
seen
yeah.
it in a few years ago. I went to go see you, and it's a wonderful piece. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you. It is We Love Maryland is a show that I kind of I co-wrote, co-conceived, co-produced, and starred in. It is kind of a baby birth project from an experience that I was very lucky to land. I got selected by Tony Award-winning, Oscar-nominated playwright Mark Medoff, who is most famous for his work "Children of Lesser God,"
Mhm.
which then was a 1980s film. Marlee Matlin, I believe, won the Academy Award for Deaf Actress in the history of Hollywood. Amazing play. Mark was creating, had been working on a script for about 7 years of a story about Marilyn Monroe and one of her closest confidants who was with her through the last couple of phases of her life. And I was very, very fortunate to book that reading. That's one of the most exciting things that I think as an actor is to start working on new material.
Mhm.
And I had always my type is the blonde, the bombshell, the sex pot,
Mhm.
the bitch, the cheerleader, and so that was always like my wheelhouse. And but I'd never taken on anything. I was a musical theater girl, and here I am getting sent this 3-act, 180-page
Yeah.
play. And I was like, okay. And so even with the reading, it was probably one of the most intimidating experiences of my life because everybody else who was doing that reading had their masters in acting and
Right.
like or were from LA with extensive film credits. And then I'm like, hey, I played Elwood. Like so, and here I'm playing Marilyn. And it was probably that reading was one of the most nerve wracking experiences of my life. But the reading was, very important for Mark and for the producers upon with that too. It was the first time he got to hear his words.
Right.
And then I didn't know what was going to come from it. After I did that reading, I got a call from Mark to go and meet him at his hotel. He lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico, so he was in New
Right.
York for that time. And
Mhm.
I went and talked with him, and he was like, "You know what? I don't know about you yet." And Mark was at this point like in his mid 70s, and
Right.
he was very, very to the point. He's like, "But my wife loves you. My wife really loved your reading," and and his wife was his muse, and
Gotcha.
she changed my life. And he's like, "We're going to give you this opportunity. We're going to give you this chance to do this role," and we basically developed it into an out of town tryout. I went to Las Cruces and we spent months putting up the show. I spent months and months of character research development, everything from dealing with dialect coaches because I wasn't wearing a microphone. And just also too, it was the first time I was doing extensive nudity. I spent a lot of time at the gym. I also too,
Yeah.
I had to memorize. I did not have dialogue for 3 pages of 100-page script.
Mhm.
And then it was in a workshop process. So things were constantly getting hacked and changed and
Right.
added.
Right.
And I spent months and months and months working on that material and I was very dedicated to the project. So long story short, we went to Las Cruces, had an amazing run out there of the show. It was well received. We did a reading in New York alongside they brought in some great Hollywood actors. Again, I'm like, what am I doing here? And the road to Broadway is a long, hard, treacherous one, and just things didn't fall into the right places at the right time.
Yeah. So many dominoes have to fall right
Yeah, so many
with the
things,
credit.
and unfortunately for me, I was very fortunate to already have been very involved in the producing side of things, so I had a actor's insight to the financials and how that whole structure worked and when it comes down to money. And I think that is only what was able to lessen the blow, but I'll never forget it. It was actually Valentine's Day. Mark didn't always have the best timing, but he
Mhm.
called me and they had interest from the theaters in New York, but they wanted a celebrity to play Marilyn.
Right.
And so honest to God, that was the hardest day of my life. Like I
I would
finally
imagine.
here have like my opportunity to make my Broadway debut and the acclimates I was getting from lead producers and
Right.
um it was like, oh my gosh, you're going to be the next Alex Sharp from Curious Incident. I mean, that kid
Mhm.
got out of college, went to Broadway and won the Tony, and everyone was like, who are you?
Right.
So like, I was like, okay. And I was ready for it. I was ready for it. And
Right.
it just because of politics. Because at that point, still now, every play, it only survives because based on who your
A-
A-list film celebrity is.
and sometimes they don't even do that. I mean, I can tell you from where I work at Duke, we had the whole theater previews at Duke series for many, many years. And I want to say we did easily 8 of 8 what were Broadway previews
Yeah.
that were supposedly going direct to Broadway. And I know of 2 that actually went, of those
Yeah.
8 that actually
And
made it
there's
there.
and it was hard to hear, and I was really upset. I was gutted. I was devastated. I know Mark was upset. It was very much like, if the show progresses, we'll make sure that you're in considerations for standbys and replacement, and you've done all the work and established it. And from there, though, is where my show was born, because I had a group of producers who were upset for me as well,
Right.
and were like, "You're too good at this, and we
Right.
want to support you in creating your own work." And that's how With Love Marilyn was kind of born. I was like, "You're right. Yeah, I'm not going to sit around and
Well,
let my creative artistry be deemed by these producers who are only looking at dollar
and
signs."
I think you
So
did one of the
I wrote
things
my own
right,
show.
and you did it the right way, in the sense of you played to your strength. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Merrily and Baby Lamb was not a musical.
Not at
Was
all. Very
and
heavy, dark
well,
straight play.
and you being you said, "Wait a minute, I can do this." And with Love Marilyn has a lot of music in it, and it's wonderful that what you do with it. So that was smart to play to your strength on that. And when you're saying, "Hey, let me take this and make my own material," which makes total sense. You get so engulfed with a character
Yeah.
that you're like, "All right, even though I did that experience, I found all this other stuff that we never touched on, and it needs
Yeah,
to
and that
be."
was the hard thing too, was for I worked so hard on playing the intimacy and the utter tragedy of the Maryland behind closed doors, and
Mhm.
I spent months immersing myself into, excuse me, I'm drinking a bubbly, everyone, I'm sorry. Like, but and I knew that that is where I also was able to excel as an actress, was being able to really bring out, expose that darkness of her. But then
Right.
I knew with my show, I wanted to play into the light of her too, where it was the Marilyn that the public saw as well. So, like, seeing her do Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, seeing that Marilyn that we all fell in love with, but then also cracking open that door to the pain and the suffering and the insecurities and the hardships that she did have, which is what
Mhm.
I really was able to learn during Medoff's piece.
Yep.
So I kind of took those two, and I took my musical theater performance element and added in with my new, passion for that storytelling of her life, and I tried to make it into a cohesive one woman show of a hypothetical scenario that played, With Love Marilyn is basically a final dress rehearsal that a lot of audiences would never get to experience because she never went on to actually perform it.
Right.
Uh, so, which is not completely far fetched. I had my show supported and fact checked by the All About Maryland organization out in LA.
Mhm.
Um, I became good friends with Samantha McLaughlin, who is the head of the organization. She actually came out to see Medoff's work, and because she also does
Gotcha.
a lot of fact checking. She's been involved with almost every major produced Maryland piece. And so when I was just trying to find the format of the show, she actually was the one who gave me the little insight that Maryland was actually in talks with the Sands Casino to perform, because she was very close with the Sinatra and all of them, and they had standing gigs there. And so that's where I kind of was like, all right, we're going to take this place at the Sands, and it's going to be, she's going to have wanting to do a show, but then ultimately, she does it, but it's whether you want to play with the idea that her death happened within that period of time nearby, or that, and I've also adapted the script and changed the script also based on the venues.
Right.
This one in London, I've had to do some rewrites on. That's the beauty of having your own show.
Right.
um and I actually have a different actress who's portraying
I was
Marilyn.
gonna
I've
say, can
passed
you talk
the baton.
talk
I
about
passed the
that?
baton.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Yeah, so you're now not performing in it now, but you're still directing and making, obviously, writing changes. Again,
Yeah.
another transition. What brought that on?
No, I mean, it was just, it kind of, I was playing, when we first started doing the show, we were playing some very interesting venues. And I also then would like, based on what the venue wanted, like we originally wrote it as like a 70-minute straight through. But there was a venue that were like, well, we have to have an intermission for concession sales. I was like, all right, so let me add in an intermission. So I kind of like was able to shape shift the show to
Mm.
what the space needed. And when I did get to direct, the show on the way I finally got to do it, I actually did it as a black box performance here in Wilmington in 2022, and shared the role. I hired another actress because there's not a lot of one woman shows out there. There's not a lot of opportunities, especially when you marry in a vocal format. And I wanted to be able to give that opportunity to somebody else. And I was very fortunate to find Sydney Smith Martin, who is a local Wilmington actress who is just, this kid is, she's got the goods. She's excellent. And it was really fun to be able to, we shared that role. I got to share that experience with her. And now 3 years later, this London came from out of nowhere. My producers, again, and we were just really supportive. There is this gorgeous, gorgeous Maryland exhibit in Arches London Bridge. And it's a renowned exhibit. It's got items from personal collections or personal collectors. I think things on loan from MGM and Fox. And it's just beautiful exhibit in this really cool venue. And yeah, we are fortunate that they are wanting us to come over and do the show. So
Cool.
we're London bound.
There you go. So back on the
Yeah,
road
but now
again.
I'm rewriting the show to fit that venue. So, Yeah, so yeah, Sid's gonna do the show over there, so I can be on the technical side of things because it's kind of a TED Talk space. It's not really a theatrical venue, so I'm going to have to. And usually, I would hire musicians every
Mhm.
venue. But we did have professional tracks laid by one of our
Oh, okay.
musical directors and orchestrators. So Sydney's going to actually be performing with the tracks over there, just because trying to figure out, London musicians. I was good about finding them in
Right.
Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, but
Yeah. No,
fortunately, I'm not tapped into the music scene in London.
whole different
So yeah,
standards.
I've gotten to reshape the show a little bit for that venue. We also usually we didn't play it fourth wall broken, and I want to have a performance element in which she can relate to the audience. Just because with the exhibit, it is so engaging, and I want the audience to feel engaged with her. But then also still, figuring out where then all of a sudden the audience is no longer there, and they get to see some of her vulnerability. So yeah, it's kind of fun. Like with all of my years of research, and thanks to Medoff's incredible experience, that I've been able to have this really rewarding little baby of mine. And, now I get to have I guess, London directing credit.
There you go.
Who knew?
So I think this is probably one of the last things I want to talk about. Let's talk about again your newest venture, the Center Stage Studios. What's that all about?
Well, you know what? You keep evolving. I love teaching. I actually, up in Durham, when I was living up there near you guys for a little bit, during the pandemic, where the world was shut down, I was very fortunate to get a performing arts teacher's job for a private school. And I've always done coachings and master classes on tour. We would come home and do things, and I was always very involved in like children's theater and I didn't realize how great I was with teaching kids, A, and teaching arts education, B. And I really, really enjoyed my time teaching at that private school during all the crazy of the pandemic. And I did get a job that brought me and Luke back down to Wilmington. So I'm back on home turf, which is exciting to be, reacquainted and to the Wilmington theater scene. And then after working for a state job, and then I ended up working for a corporate job this past year, I wanted to give back more to the theater community, and I wasn't performing as much as I wanted to anymore. I was kind of losing a lot of myself this year because as much as restaurants have paid my bills, managing a restaurant was exceptionally difficult. And I mean, I went 9 months without having a weekend off with my husband.
Yeah.
I haven't done a show in over a year and change. And I was like, I'm not happy. I'm not
Yeah.
happy with. And so I kind of reevaluated my life, and I decided that I'm going to kind of create my own studio. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of support. I have the support of Evolution Dance Complex, which they are letting me rent space from this gorgeous dance studio. And so I'm very lucky. And I kind of looked around because there's a lot of amazing arts educations here. And there's like so many people here now doing performing. Like
Yeah.
when you were here, like the amount of opportunity for kids is
Insane.
bonkers.
Yeah.
Wilmington is just this breeding ground for Broadway talent. I mean, we have quite a few kids that I know. JJ Neiman is one of them, who's just closed Back to the Future and now is going into Hamilton. Like this, he's one of
Yeah.
the kids, you know. Um, so I just kind of wanted to go and reinvent myself a little bit and give back. And I will say, starting your own business is not for the weak.
No. Yeah.
Um, been very challenging. And I just kept telling myself, build it and they will come, build it and they will come. So yeah, and so far, in truth, I'm only 3 weeks into technically the launch of my studio. I'm up to a little over 15 students. I teach right now only 2 group classes. I have an intro to musical theater class for like a 10 to 14 range, and then I have an adult musical theater class, and then I'm really booming with private lessons, which is really exciting. I love the one-on-one work because it's all customized to whatever that person wants to work on. My youngest student right now is 7 years old, and my oldest is, she's in her I'm not going to disclose her age, but
Right.
she is just,
Yeah.
she's amazing and fabulous. And but the audition scene here is competitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's competitive community theater and professional theater. And so now, if anything, I'm working on a lot of audition prep, which is
Right.
really, really fun. So now I feel like it's full circle because all of my years and decades of audition experience in New York City, regional productions, like you name it, like it gets to kind of come back, and I get to help people and guide them in their theatrical goals and
Right. Well, I
journeys.
mean,
So
you get to the point where like you don't even realize it. I mean, like honestly, this is kind of one of the reasons of starting this podcast was talking to somebody else who just kind of looked at me at one point. It's like, wow, you've met a lot of people and you know a lot about this business. And I just kind of like went,
yeah.
yeah, I guess I do. It never
Yeah,
dawned
and I
on me.
forget that too. It's like I don't even realize it until like I have these conversations with you, and I'm like,
Right.
I've done a lot of stuff.
Right.
I'm like, no wonder I'm tired. But yeah,
But
I'm
at the
very,
same
very
time, you want to
proud.
you want to share that too, those experiences, and you want to be able to
Yeah.
pass that information along. And that's a great thing to do, especially there with the kids and stuff like that. We did it for years. My wife and I, we taught classes, and even while we were here in Durham.
I know
Um,
I was one of Susie's kids with
yeah,
Judy, like yeah, I'm a product of all that here. So
it,
I'm really excited, and I really do hope it picks up. It's picking up our, like, again, like I'm so overwhelmed by the amount of feedback I've gotten that's been so positive, and parents being like, oh my gosh, like, I've just, within one lesson, I saw a change in my child's demeanor and behavior and excitement level. And that's awesome. And getting to help adults come out of their shell, or, because as an adult, I mean, I'm turning 44, and like, we don't talk about it. It's so taboo in the theater scene to be like, even especially for women, like, you're 40, your body changes. I can't sing the way I used to sing. I can't pick up choreography as fast as I can. I like it, and we don't get to practice as much anymore as
right,
we should. So I'm very happy that I'm really getting to help strengthen some of those skills, so that going into an audition room for us older performers, we
mm,
still feel like we still have a lot to offer, and
right.
that's important to me. Mental health in that aspect, since you know is really important for me to have that, establish that confidence for some of the aging performers.
Totally get that. Totally get that. Well, Erin, thank you. I want to say thanks for joining me. I mean, this is a new experience for me, and I can tell you that you made my first interview for this whole venture very easy, and I kind of planned that on purpose because I know you are an easy person to talk to, so I cheated a little bit. But
Oh, well, no, thank you. I'm really, really flattered that I am your first, I was your guinea pig, and then
well,
but this is an amazing
at
thing you're doing.
the same time, I do know that you have a lot to share out there, and your experiences are definitely something that people want to know about. So I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so
Every
much. I appreciate you.
No problem. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Half Hour Call. And if you like what you heard, make sure you hit subscribe and join me for the next episode. Until then, I'm Rich Kless, and we'll see you next time. Keep the faith.
Places, please. This is Places.